Hello, my name is Sylvia, and you are watching Regent Park TV. On February 24th, 2026, people gathered to celebrate Black History Month through one of the oldest and most powerful cultural traditions, storytelling. Hosted by Regent Park's own Murphy Brown, the evening featured Anansi folktales shared with families, youth, and elders, bringing laughter, reflection, and cultural memory into a shared community space. Brown, a journalist, radio host, storyteller, and activist, framed the stories not simply as entertainment, but as living history. I am an African woman who was born in South America, she has said of her background in a Buzz Spotlight interview. I grew up in an African-centered community where the elders told stories about our African ancestors and our culture before the Mafa. My elders were Pan-Africanist, and that has greatly influenced every area of my life, has informed my activism, storytelling, etc. Her approach to storytelling carries the lineage forward, honoring the role of elders as knowledge keepers and cultural barriers. The stories she shared belong to the Anansi tradition, a body of West African and Caribbean folktales centered on the clever spider trickster Anansi. Originating among the Ashanti people of present-day Guyana, Anansi tales traveled across the Atlantic during the transatlantic slave trade and took root throughout the Caribbean and the Americas. In these stories, Anansi triumphs through wit rather than strength, outsmarting kings, animals, and even spirits. For many in the Africa diaspora, the character has long symbolized resilience under oppression, the power of intelligence over force, and the importance of passing knowledge across generations. For communities like Regent Park and the broader downtown East, the significance of such storytelling runs deep. Brown's work as a storyteller is inseparable from her media activism. After the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission revoked the license of the campus community station in 2011, she chose to continue community broadcasting with Radio Regent to ensure marginalized voices remained on the airwaves. I wanted to continue providing an alternative to mainstream corporation radio, she explained, giving a voice to traditionally marginalized communities. Her storytelling events extend that same mission into physical community spaces, ensuring that stories not only broadcast outward but circulate locally. Hearing Anansi's stories together allows elders to transmit values, parents to share heritage with their children, and youth to see their cultures reflected and celebrated. The act of gathering itself becomes resistance against erasure. As Regent Park continues to evolve, storytellers like Murphy Brown play a vital role in sustaining cultural memory. Let's take a look at the stories and hear what Murphy Brown has to say about them.
Before I begin the story, I want to share a song because it is Black History Month. And it has been for the past 30 years since Dr. Jean Augustine was able to persuade the members of Parliament that it would be a good thing to celebrate Black History Month in February because Canada and the U.S. have so much in common. And I was very pleased to hear the Prime Minister acknowledge that Canadians historically would look over to the United States and say, oh, look at what they're doing. They're so awful. And it seems to be a well-hidden secret that whatever has happened in the U.S. historically has happened in Canada. Think about anything that has happened in the U.S., from slavery to segregation to the destruction of African communities. I don't know how many people have heard of Africville in Nova Scotia, and things like that. Whatever has happened in the States has happened here. So after Slavery was abolished in Canada on August 1st, 1834, and it was still going strong in the U.S. A lot of people, enslaved Africans, choose the opportunity to run over to Canada on the Underground Railroad, and that's mostly what people hear, the Underground Railroad, but they don't hear about the horrific things that happened here in Canada during slavery. I remember when I first came here, the first thing that I read was a book about the history of African Canadians. And there is an ad in that book that you can see if you go on the internet. It's about a 40-year-old woman named Peggy and her 15-year-old son named Jupiter. There's an ad in an Ontario newspaper selling Peggy and Jupiter. They're selling Peggy for $150 and Jupiter for $200. And the man who is selling them, his name is Peter Russell. February 10th, 1806, this ad. And guess where this was happening? Right here in Toronto. You can find where Peter Russell lives in this city. And he's selling Peggy and Jupiter. And you can pay part now and monthly or whatever. But if you have ready cash, he will sell them to you for 25% off. Peggy and Jupiter. And that has stayed with me for all these almost 50 years that I have lived in this country. So what I am going to play now is Lift Every Voice and Sing. And most people, I guess, wouldn't know it, but this song is oh, okay. Thank you. I don't have to play it.
I'll try to find it.
Wintley Phipps. Please see if you can find the one by Wintley Phipps. W-I-N-T, W-I-N-T.
Phipps, like that?
P-H. Yeah. Oh, there it is.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring.
It's probably fun.
Ring with the
So this is Murphy Brown, an African woman who was born in South America and grew up in an African-centered community where the elders told stories about their African ancestors and culture before the Mafa, which is the African Holocaust, also known as the transatlantic slave trade. Her elders were Pan-Africanists, and that has greatly influenced every area of her life. It's informed her activism, storytelling, etc. So Pan-Africanism is a worldwide movement with the aim of solidarity, unity, and self-determination among people of African descent, both on the continent and in the diaspora. Rooted in resisting slavery, colonialism, and racism, it promotes the belief that all African people share a common history and destiny. Murphy is an educator, a historian, a storyteller. Don't tell me that's me. I'm so sorry. Okay. I had it on so I could hear Murphy and then I missed her call, so that didn't work for me very well. I So she's also writes a regular column for Share newspaper, which is also published online. She hosts 2 weekly radio programs at Radio Regent. She's a retired African heritage instructor with the Toronto Board of Education and the Toronto District School Board, and a former member of the Organization of Parents of Black Children and the Black Action Defense Committee. She's an active blogger at Words from Murphy Brown, and in 2015 she published a collection of essays in a book called Berbetian Griot. Murphy is also a former staff member and longtime supporter of Parkdale Project Read, and has joined us on many occasions to tell Anansi stories and talk about Black history. So we have a long history with Murphy, and we're very happy to have you here today. So,
Yay! Thank you. Thank you. And the images that go with lift every voice and sing, the one that's sung by Wintley Phipps, I think is so powerful. There are so many images there that speak to the history, and it's mostly African Americans, but there are a few people like the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who was born in Jamaica, and a few other people. So that is Pan-Africanism. As Mary mentioned, I was born into a Pan-Africanist family where, even though none of us have ever been to the African continent since our ancestors were taken away from there 400 years ago, Pan-Africanism means that we understand we're connected, whether people are born in Canada, in the United States, in Jamaica, in Brazil, in Colombia, in the UK. As Peter Tosh said, don't care where you come from, as long as you're Black, you're an African. I know many people don't think that way. Now, the stories I am going to tell are told in various languages. So, during slavery, Africans were mostly taken from West Africa and Central Africa. There was another slave trade in the East where people were taken elsewhere. But those of us, like me, my ancestors were taken to this part of the world, the Americas and the Caribbean islands. So it is sometimes difficult for us to know anything about our history. Most of us don't know beyond maybe our grandparents or great-grandparents For me, I know that one of my great-grandfathers, because we all have 4 great-grandfathers, 2 grandfathers, 4 great-grandfathers. I only know the full name of one of my great-grandfathers, and that's where my name Murphy comes from. Because when the Africans were enslaved, they were not allowed to use their African names. They were given names by the people who enslaved them. So, for instance, when you have certain names, you have an idea who enslaved your ancestors. So, the names Kelly and Murphy are in my family, so we know at one point those are Irish names. And then we have names like Hughes, which is Welsh from the United Kingdom. And we have names like Liverpool, which is from there. And then there are Africans who have Dutch names, Portuguese names, Spanish names. So the Anansi stories are told in Dutch on islands like Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao, and South America, Suriname. They are told in French from French-speaking islands. They are told in English from English-speaking countries, Guyana, Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Montserrat. Some of these places you may have heard of, and some you may not. So the Anansi stories are told in whatever language the enslaved Africans were forced to speak by the people who enslaved them. And Anansi has different names in these different places. Brer Anansi, Brother Anansi, Nansi, depending on which country, what language. But the stories are the same. Anansi is a spider, and that word Anansi comes from the Akan people of Ghana, because many of us in the diaspora, our ancestors were taken from Ghana. So we're taken from Nigeria, Senegal, the Congo, all these different places. But the Akan people seem to be the strongest. So Anansi is this spider, and the Anansi stories encourage these enslaved Africans that even though they were enslaved, they had some kind of autonomy, and sometimes they had these little battles that they won. They wouldn't get their freedom, but they had these little battles that they could win. And in places like Jamaica, there was a whole community of Maroons who fled in 1655 when the British took over the island from the Spanish. And when the Spanish and the British were fighting each other, and the Spanish were fleeing in boats to get away from the British, many of the enslaved Africans seized that opportunity to run into the hills, and they escaped. And it was a battle between them and the British from 1655 until slavery was abolished on August 1st, 1838, finally. The Maroons in Jamaica, in the English-speaking Caribbean, are the most well-known. There were Maroon communities in Mexico when enslaved Africans fled from the Spanish. There were Maroon communities in Brazil when the Africans fled from the Portuguese. There were Maroon communities in Colombia, in Bolivia, wherever there were Africans enslaved. Some of them were brave enough to say, we're not doing this, we're not staying here. Even if we die, we're escaping. So every community has Maroons. Suriname, all those places. And in every one of those places, there are Anansi stories. Anansi encourage them that even if you are small, because, you know, spider is little, and these people are big, lion, tiger, elephant, you can still find a way to have some autonomy over your body. So the first story that I am going to tell is how the Anansi stories got their names. Anansi, always ambitious and looking for something, decided that he wanted to have the stories named after him, because at that time, the keeper of all the stories was the god. And this, of course, is the Akan people's belief systems. So their god was named Niame, and he lived in the sky. And Nancy thought, how would I get to have these stories named after me? I really want this. So one day he decided to spin his web and woke up. And he prostrated himself in front of Niame. And he said, I would like to have the stories, all the stories of our people named after me. And Niame looked at him and said, look at this little thing. You want all the stories named after you? And Anansi said, yes, I think I deserve it. So Niame said, okay, you can have the stories named after you. You need to do 4 things. Bring me the python. Bring me that one of the little fairies. Bring me a hornet, at least 1 hornet, and bring me a tiger. And Anansi thought, oh my goodness. But Anansi, even though he was little, like the Jamaicans say, little but talawa, he was going to do it. He was going to do it. And so Anansi said, okay, Niame, I will be back. I will be back. And he bowed out and he went back down to his family. Because Anansi always had his family. And he spoke to his wife, a very wise woman. And she gave him some good ideas. And he said, okay. So the first thing he did, he went walking, he saw pythons. He said, oh, look at you. Do you know you are the most pitiful python I have seen in a while? Just the other day, I saw a python almost twice your size. And the python, very proud, said, what? You couldn't possibly. As far as I know, I am the longest python in this neighborhood. And Anansi said, well, how would I know that? Measure me, said the python. And Anansi said, good idea. I will measure you. Hold on. And he went and he got a long piece of wood. And he came back. And he said, you know that python that I was telling you about? He's about this length. So if you are longer than this, I will give you your props. You would be the longest python in the neighborhood with proof and bragging rights. So the python spread himself next to this long piece of wood, and Anansi said, this is not working. You are not straight. You are, you know, kind of how you snakes go. I can't really tell. So the python tried to straighten himself, but it wasn't working. Anansi said, I've got a great idea. I can go and pick some vines, and I can tie your tail to the end, and then you can stretch yourself to the other end. That's a good idea, Anansi. So Anansi went and got some vines. He tied the python to the end. He said, this is not working. I need to tie you in the middle, and then we will see. So he tied the python in the middle. This is not working. I think if you stretch and I tie you to the other end, this will work. And the python said, do it, do it. So Anansi tied his head to the other end. And Anansi said, you know what? You are as long as that other python I was telling you about. Python said, yeah. Now I've proved it. Untie me. Anansi said, no, not so fast. I have something else in mind. And he dragged the python up, presented him to Nyame. Nyame was shocked. How did this little spider tie up this big, long python and bring him to me? But Anansi did it. Okay, Anansi, you've got one thing done. Go and get the other three things. So Anansi went back down, spoke to his wife, his very wise wife, and she gave him a great idea. So back Anansi went hunting through the forest, and he saw tiger. So Anansi dug a hole and put vegetation over it. And he said, tiger, guess what? There's something interesting right there where you see all that vegetation. I think you would be very interested in it. So poor tiger ran, and he didn't realize there was a hole under there, and he fell in. And Anansi said, oh my goodness, tiger, I'm so sorry. Let me help you out. And tiger said, oh, Anansi, please help me out. So Anansi said, okay, what I'm going to have to do to get you out of that hole, I am going to have to spin a whole lot of web and get you secured. And then I am going to tie the other end to this tree. And when I bend this tree, you will fly out of it. Tiger wasn't sure he wanted to be tied up with webs, but he thought, if I stay in here, I'll starve to death. So he said, okay, Anansi, you can tie me up. And when Anansi tied up Tiger, Tiger couldn't do a thing when Anansi dragged him out of that hole and up to Niami and said, Niami, look, I've got Tiger. Niami was shocked. How is he doing this? The next thing, Niami said, okay, you've done two things. You've got two more things. You've got to get that little fairy, and you've got to get the hornet or wasp. So what did Anansi do? He went to a hornet's nest, and he started pouring water, and they thought it was raining. And Anansi said, it's raining, it's raining. You have to get out of here. And I have a new home for you, because he'd already set that up. And when those hornets, like all of them, not just one, flew into this trap that Anansi had set, he sealed it up. The hornets were upset. If they could get Anansi, they would sting him. But Anansi just laughed and took the whole nest of hornets up to Niami. Niami was getting worried. He can really do this? He's done 3 of these impossible tasks. Yeah, well, I guess he won't get that fairy. She has a brain. So Anansi spoke again with his wife, that wise woman. And she gave him some great ideas. So Anansi went out, and he formed something that looked like a fairy. Looked exactly. I guess he was an early AI person. So this thing looked exactly like another fairy. And Anansi coated it with some sticky stuff. So then the fairy comes around, and she sees this thing that looks like a fairy. So as she's flying past, she said, good morning. And the thing didn't answer because it was like a statue, a mannequin, whatever. It had no life. Well, this fairy was very hot-headed, and if anybody was disrespectful to her, they would feel her wrath. So when there was no answer, she came back, and she said, did you hear me greet you? Do you know who I am? Don't you have any manners? Good morning. And this thing just stood right there and didn't answer her. She said, if you don't answer me, I will slap your face. So, good morning, no answer. Slap. What? Let go of me. How dare you, you rude thing. Not only don't you have any manners, but now you are trying to be, what are you trying to do? Let go of my hand or I will slap your other cheek. No answer. Slap. Now both hands are stuck to this thing. Oh, she was upset. If you don't let go of my hands, I will kick you. No answer. Kick. She's stuck. Kick. Now she's stuck. Both hands, both feet. Anansi came out from where he was hiding, took the ferry up to Niamey. Niamey was in shock. How did Anansi trick this ferry? These little people are so smart. However, I cannot go back on my word. It would look terrible. I am the king. I am the king of the gods. Oh, I have to keep my word. So he had to name the stories Anansi stories. And that is how we get the Anansi stories. Because Anansi was able to fulfill those 4 tasks: to bring to Niamey the python, the tiger, the hornets, a whole nest of hornets, and the fairy, those intelligent creatures. Many of us have read about them. I know I did when I was little. Fairies flying around Tinkerbell. And so there were some of them in the Akan kingdom also. And that is how the Anansi stories came about. And that story is told in different languages wherever there are Akan descendants, which is everywhere. As I said, Guyana, Suriname, Brazil, Jamaica, Barbados, all those places.
Thank you, Murphy.
Now the next Anansi story I'm going to tell.
I wonder whether we should we're used to taking a little bit of a break at 3
Oh,
o'clock.
that's fine.
Would that be okay to take
That
like a
is
10-minute
fine.
break? We'll come back and we'll hear another story.
That's fine.
Are there any questions before we take a break or anything you wanted to say?
Amazing story.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just really sleepy because I stay up until 12 watching my show. That's one of my
Oh,
so tired.
I'm guilty of that too.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I'm
I'm
like-
up till 1 o'clock.
Can I ask a question about the story?
Yes.
So I noticed that in this version of the story, you talked about he spoke to his very wise wife and got some good advice.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't heard that before in an Anansi story, so I'm wondering if that's like a kind of newer sort of feminist version of the Anansi story, or does that go way back?
That's the story that I heard as a child.
Really? That's amazing.
That
because I don't remember
Anansi's
that.
wife.
Go get a drink.
Because I thought it was the Anansi spider that was the wise one. That was so I love that he talked to his wife to get ideas.
He talked to his wife,
Yeah.
and so you've heard it, but without him.
Without
talking.
the reference to the wife. Yeah, yeah.
That's rude of whoever.
I like that.
To
mention
you
it
know, even the history stories, like you would hear about Kofi in Guyana, who started the Berbice uprising of enslaved Africans. Yesterday was 263 years, February 23rd, 1763. And you never hear about the women.
Yeah. That's typical
And
history.
I like to bring in the women because there were women. You cannot have an uprising without women. What, it's only the men who would fight? No! The women would be there with sticks or what. As a matter of fact, Nanny of the Maroons in Jamaica is one of the most well-known of the Maroons. She is even a national hero in Jamaica because anybody who knows anything about the Maroons must know about Nanny. Her people were never caught. She would be up in the mountains between all the bushes, and she would direct the guerrilla warfare let the British come. Don't move. Everybody is decorated with leaves. They can't tell that humans are there. Let them come. And when you can see the whites of their eyes, close the circle and attack. They have guns. We have cutlass and spears and sticks. That was Nanny. So that is one woman they cannot erase from the history. There were always women. Same in Barbados, when they had the uprising. There was Bossa. And I noticed that they hardly mentioned Nanny Grigg. They were together. But you would see, oh, Bossa's rebellion. No, it was Bossa and Nanny Grigg. Whenever I write about it, Bossa and Nanny Grigg. And then there were uprisings on some Caribbean islands, and the women were the leaders. There was one where the woman is called Solitude. She was pregnant when she was one of the leaders, and they captured them, and they didn't kill her because they wanted that child. That child would be a slave. And the day after she gave birth, they hanged her. But her name is there, Solitude. And in Haiti also, you usually hear about Le Couture and these men. And there were women. So there are always women.
I just want to give people a break because they're used to taking
Yes,
a break at 3.
sorry.
So let's take a break for 10 minutes and then we'll come back. And you don't have a glass of water or a cup of tea or anything? Can I get you something?
I'm good.
You're good?
I went to Tim Hortons. That relates me a little also. They don't have a plain Coke. Whole image you would see at the top, it says Kwaku Anansi.
Oh, that's what you want. It's a carrot.
And if you can get the name in, that would be great. Yeah, so as I said, Anansi has Brother Anansi, Brother Anansi, in different countries, depending on the language.
Oh, okay.
Kwaku
And it says
Anansi.
it's a character. It's a character.
He reminds me a little bit about Spider-Man.
Well, when I used to teach the African Heritage Program, I would let my students know that the original Spider-Man is Anansi. The original Spider-Man, he was around since how many thousands of years before somebody thought to write a comic strip and name it Spider-Man.
I used to watch Spider-Man
introduce
since I was a young kid.
How old is he?
I guess there's different histories everywhere.
Big? Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's great.
I think we're all back. If you want to
Yes.
start again, that'd be great.
Well, Anansi was very proud. He wanted so many things besides the stories being named after him. Anansi wanted to be the wisest person in the world. He alone must be wise and lord it over everybody. So he went to Niamey. He couldn't be Niamey, but as close as possible. And he said, I know you are wise. You're up here. I'm on earth. I want to be the wisest person on earth. Please give me all the wisdom. And Niamey said, Anansi, Aren't you satisfied with having all the stories named after you? No, I want to be the wisest creature on earth. Nobody else will be wiser than I am. So, Yami said, okay, guess what? I will give you a container of wisdom, but you have to be able to take it with you. So Anansi was very happy. Yes, yes, yes. I'll come back and get it. And then I'll take it with me down to earth, and I will be the wisest person on earth. So Anansi went up with a calabash. A calabash is made from gourd, from a gourd. It's on a tree, and then you pick it, and you make a calabash with it. When I was a child, we had several calabashes. You could fetch water in it from anywhere to anywhere. Some were big and some were small. Some people even put food in calabashes to eat out of the calabashes. And it was made from a dried gourd. You pick it from the tree, you cut it open, you scoop out the inside, and I'm not sure how it was made because I was a child and there were many things that the adults did that I either didn't pay attention to or I didn't want to be involved. I wanted the finished product, like fufu. Anyway, let me not go there. I'm telling the Anansi story. So Anansi went with a calabash, but the calabash broke. So fortunately, the wisdom didn't escape. He went back with kente cloth. This is a kind of fabric that you can get from Ghana. But more and more, I see it being sold. It's not the authentic one because that's very expensive. So that didn't work. Anansi went back with several things. And this time, Anansi decided that he was not going to consult his wife. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had such a terrible time. He was going to do it on his own. He was so over and over this happened. And then the other silly thing he did, he was tying the wisdom in front of him as he tried to climb. Eventually, as he was climbing a tree, he was climbing a tree now to hide the wisdom because he got it. As he was climbing the tree, his son who had consulted mom, so there he got the wisdom from his mother, said, "Dad, why don't you tie it to your back? Because you cannot climb with it in front of you." And Anansi looked at his son and he thought, if this child is wiser than I am, I have no right to hoard all the wisdom. So he just threw it down. All the wisdom escaped, And so everybody got a little bit of wisdom. We all have a little bit of wisdom. Even little babies, they know when they reach the edge of the bed, if they roll further, they're going to fall over. So we all received a little bit of wisdom because of Anansi and the god Niame. And that is how each of us, we've got our own wisdom from childhood to old age, where I am right now. Old age.
What was that one called? That story?
The wisdom.
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 Okay.
There was no bucket of wisdom.
Great.
Yes. So many of the stories that I know are from Ghana. Many of the stories, because even though I know that I have ancestors from Senegal, Mali, and Nigeria and other places, most of the stories I heard were from Ghana, whether they were straight from Ghana or they were stories that developed in Trinidad and Tobago or somewhere else, but it came from Ghana. And then there are the Adinkra symbols, like Chinyame, which translated roughly means only God is more powerful than I am. And I've heard that in long ago days, if somebody was upset with the chief, they would wear something with the Chinyame symbol on it, so that the chief would realize that this person is saying, you're not God. Only God is more powerful than I am. And you're not God, so you're not more powerful than I am. You may be chief, you may be king, you may be Nana, because that was a title, like Nanaya Santawa. I don't know who may have heard of Nanaya Santawa. Ooh, look.
Yes, it's Murphy.
Hello.
Come on in, Rose.
Push.
The Adinkra symbols,
Hold on.
there's one at Dundas and Young. If you have been there, you might see that it's called Sankofa Square now. That is an Adinkra symbol where the Sankofa bird is flying forward, but the head is facing back. And as far as I know, translated roughly, it means go back and fetch it. You may be going forward, but you need to remember your history. You need to remember what happened before, because you have to learn about your history. Or as the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey said, if you don't know your history, and this is not his exact quote, you will be like a tree without roots. You will be like tumbleweed. A wind blows here, you're gone there. A wind blows there, you're gone there. And since I was a child, I'm always interested in my history and other people's history. So the Anansi stories are very important. Africans from giving up hope because they had the Anansi stories. They knew that if little Anansi could sway larger animals and powerful entities like Niamey, the god, that even though it seemed like they had no power, they did. I mean, their children were sold away from them, their parents, their life partners, but they had hope that someday it would come to an end, and Anansi was part of that. Anansi traveled from the continent of Africa to wherever Akan people were taken. And somebody asked me about my earrings, and they're in the shape of the continent of Africa. Some people have said to me, "Oh, I like your Jamaican earrings." No, it's not Jamaica. But a lot of people believe that if you're of African descent, if you're black, if you're dark skin, you're from Jamaica. And I went to Jamaica once for a week in 2018, and that's about it. So there are so many people from the African continent, and for generations in my family, we weren't sure which part of the continent. We still do not have specific countries where, you know, we can say, yeah, my great-grandfather. But my niece, her two children, they can point to a place in Africa because their father is from North Africa. And I remember when my niece had her son, I wrote an article about it that was published in Share. I thought, if my grandfather had lived to see this. And then recently, my nephew is married to a woman from the Congo, so his two children have a specific place in Africa where their mother's ancestors came from. And I'm thinking, good thing we moved to Canada, because if we had remained in Guyana, we would only marry Guyanese. And so it is so important during this month. And I've heard people say, oh, this is the shortest month, the coldest month. They gave us, no, nobody gave us this. Carter Godwin Woodson, 100 years ago in 1926, and this is 2026, Carter Godwin Woodson began this celebration, this acknowledgement. So 100 years ago, February, 100 years ago, 1926. And in Canada, it's been 30 years. Yep. So here we are this month, and it's surprising that it's only during this month, mostly, that you see information, you hear information, and people realize that, oh, there have been African people in this country since the 1600s, beginning with Matthew da Costa. I don't know if anybody knows about Matthew da Costa. He came here with the Champlain expedition when the French came here, and he was interpreting for the French with the Mi'kmaq people. So if he knew the Mi'kmaq language, it means he had to be here before. However, I am going to tell my last Anansi story, and this is Anansi and the birds. Anansi used to see the birds coming to where he was living, looking very happy and cheerful. And so he said, "Why are you guys looking so happy and well fed?" And the bird said, "Well, we went to Bird Cherry Island. The cherries there, and Nancy, you believe it." So Anansi said, "Well, I would like to go to Bird Cherry Island." "No, you can't go to Bird Cherry Island, Anansi. It's far away. We fly there." Anansi said, "Oh, please, please, I really need to go to Bird Cherry Island." And the bird said, "Anansi, we cannot help you." And Anansi said, "I have an idea. Why don't you give me some feathers? I will stick it on to me, and I can fly to Bird Cherry Island with you." And the birds thought about it. "Okay, we're willing. We can give you some feathers." And Nancy stuck the feathers all over his body. And he flew with the birds to Bird Cherry Island. And they ate and they were happy. And Nancy had never seen anything like this. And then it became evening time, and it was time to go back home. And the bird said, "We're ready to leave." And Nancy was sitting there, cherries. He knew he couldn't take them back with him. They were too many. And Nancy said, "No, I'm not going. You have to stay here until I finish eating these cherries, maybe tomorrow." The bird said, "No, we are leaving." And Nancy said, "Well, go, I don't care." The bird said, "Well, give us back our feathers." And Nancy said, "Take your feathers, I'm fine right here." So the birds left him. And Anansi was happy. He sat there and he ate, and he was a greedy thing. So next day, he had so many cherries. Next day, when all the cherries were finished, and he realized the position that he was in, he couldn't believe what his greed had done to him. So he's looking for a way to go home. And then he saw Brother Alligator. He said, "Brother Alligator, my friend, can I ask for some help?" Brother Alligator was shocked. "Anansi, what are you doing here? How did you get here?" "Well, some birds kidnapped me and brought me here. And then they just abandoned me. So if you would be so kind, my brother, to take me back to my home, I would be ever so grateful." And Brother Alligator said, "Well, I can take you to your home, but I have to go to my home first, because I have to help my wife take care of our babies." So Nancy said, "That's fine, I can spend the night." So Brother Alligator very graciously allowed Anansi to sit on his back, and he took Anansi to his home, because he had to help his wife. Considerate Brother Alligator. So the children were all eggs, and they had to wash, he and his wife had to wash them. Well, now Anansi was hungry. And he was eyeing those eggs. But he knew if he ate them, if he ate just one, Brother Alligator and his wife would destroy him. So Anansi said, "You have all these children to wash. Let me help you." "Oh, Brother Anansi, that is so thoughtful and helpful. Please, we appreciate the help." So Anansi took some of the eggs, and instead of washing them, he ate them. He was so ungrateful, but he was hungry. That was his excuse. Yeah, they have so many. If I eat a few, so what? And so the next morning, before Brother Alligator and his wife could count their children, their eggs, Anansi said, "Oh, Brother Alligator, I have to go home. You see how you were helping your wife with your children? My wife must be beside herself because I wasn't there to put my darling children to bed. So if you could call some of your friends to help me, and then you don't have to take me home." So Brother Alligator said, "That's a good idea. I have these two fish, they're my friends." So he called the fish, and they came, row, row, row your boat. They weren't swimming, they were rowing. Row, row, row your boat, empty down the street. They came. One could not hear and one could not speak. So this was ideal for Anansi. Anansi jumped on the boat. Row, row, row your boat. He's encouraging them to row. And then Brother Alligator and his wife went to take care of their babies. And they noticed some of them were missing. And they saw the shells and they knew it was Anansi. So Brother Alligator shouted out to the fish. They were a ways, so he knew he couldn't catch up to them. Brother fish, bring back Anansi." Anansi, row, row, row your boat gently. Brother fish, bring back Anansi." So the one who could speak but couldn't hear said, "What is he saying?" And the one who could hear couldn't speak. So Anansi was in charge. And Anansi is, row, row, row your boat gently. Go, go. He's saying, move faster, move faster. And so the fish rowed Anansi home. Anansi jumped out of the boat. And he was so happy to escape. And since then, if an alligator sees a spider, it's the end of that spider because of what Anansi did to Brother Alligator and his wife when they were so kind to him. So, any questions? Anybody heard of Anansi stories before?
No. It's my first time.
Oh, okay. Anybody?
I miss you, Miss Murphy.
Well, I missed you too. I was looking and
Yeah.
thinking, where is Rose?
I was at a book, what? Kalarja, what we call it,
Oh, okay.
book thing.
Where, at the library?
No, at DPMC.
Stop.
What, do you?
Davenport Community Health Center.
Okay.
Your
One of our
Yep.
sister organizations.
Oh, okay.
Your paper goes there.
Share?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I've heard Anansi stories at Miss Lou's room.
Oh,
at Harbor Front.
yes.
So
Yes.
sometimes during Black History Month,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
have
yeah.
events and activities.
I haven't been there since 2020, before 2020, because when COVID
Same
hit,
with me. I haven't been.
my life changed.
No, we were there after. Weren't we were there after?
After
I
2020.
haven't been there.
The last time when I saw you there.
I think it was before.
Not after
Before that?
2020.
Yeah.
Time flies, Rose.
So that's how long?
Yeah.
Not after 24.
Yeah.
And this is 26. Imagine. Wow.
It's a long time.
So, only one person
You
has
take
had
this as a-
an answer.
I have one question.
Yes.
Well, I guess I was curious who told you your first Anansi story, and also I was curious when you're telling the stories, do you find yourself using the way that they told it in your storytelling too? Like, do you remember?
You mean the words or the action?
I guess everything, like the style.
Well, when I was a child and we were told Anansi stories, there was always action. You're dancing, you're singing, and everybody would join in. But I can't have people getting up to
Oh,
dance.
even like we would be joining.
Right.
Cool.
The people who are listening,
Yeah.
everybody would be joining in. Like, for instance, if I'm telling a story, I might stop and illustrate something like, rock them one by one, gallon by
then
two by two,
gallon
gallon by
finger much.
Oh, yes.
Gallon boy, no, Manuel. Finger broke rocks too. Gallon, Miss Murphy.
Yes,
You know the words and the steps.
Yeah, I know the words.
Yeah.
right. And
I know Anansi story.
Yeah.
where I was born, we have something called kwekwe. It's from the African continent. It survived slavery. Kwekwe is the night before a wedding, where there would be singing and dancing. And some of the songs would be encouraging the bride and groom in various ways. So, for instance, they would be singing, Jane engaged and she think nobody like she. Jane engaged and she think nobody like she. Run a polka down, run a polka down, run a polka down, run a polka down. So songs like that, or, oh, this one I know is from Jamaica because we don't have a Linstead market in Guyana.
Carry me a
Yarmiyaki go Linstead market, not a quati will sell. Yarmiyaki go Linstead market, not a quati will sell. Lord, what a night, not a night, what a Saturday night. Lord,
what a night,
not a Saturday night. Everybody come feel up, not a quati will sell. Yes.
Everybody come feel up, where they move and no break.
Oh, yes. So there would be songs. In the telling of stories, there would be songs and actions. So, but when I'm telling a story in Toronto, unless it's a group of people who know the songs and would be willing to,
Do the action.
I just tell the story. Some people are willing, even if they don't know, to learn the steps. But So I don't know if that answers your question. I cannot remember who told me the first Anansi story. It was my dad, my mom, my grandparents, my Uncle Farfus. Oh, somebody's scarf has fallen.
It was really good. I really enjoyed it, your story.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I enjoy telling the stories. Yes.
Good job.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
It makes me to remember when I was young back home. They used to tell us stories about tortoise.
About what?
Tortoise.
Oh, yes.
Similar story like this.
Yes.
How tortoise will cleverly
Yes.
extort
Yeah.
some people. And as we grow, so there are some majority of the character traits that they don't want to see in children. So it used to give us.
Okay.
So this story is very beautiful.
Thank you. Yes, there are stories about tortoises, there are stories about monkeys, there are stories about rabbits. Yes. Yeah. There are many. Oh, let me tell a short story about how the agouti lost his tail. I'm not sure what animal the agouti is in North America. The agouti and the dog were very good friends. They loved each other, they were friends, and so on. And then one day, somebody put up a notice that there was going to be a big fete, a party, for all the animals with horns. The agouti didn't have horns. The dog did not have horns. The agouti is a small animal like a squirrel or something. And so they really wanted to go. I mean, calypso music, roti, dal puri, curry chicken, and food. And then music. They wanted to go, but they couldn't go. Only animals with horns could go to this party. It was going to be on a boat. It was going to be a cruise. And then one day, as Dog was walking along, he found two horns on the ground. And he said, "What? I can tie these to my ears. And I'm big enough. I could pass for a sheep or something." And he tied them on. And then agouti was looking with longing as the people were boarding. And he saw a dog. And the music was playing. Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? And there was Dog boogieing down the gangway. And agouti said, he's not going to make it. He can't make it. However, Dog passed. And the captain was a bull cow, a male cow. And Dog just boogied down and went on the boat. And then the boat started sailing. Agouti was so upset. He shouted, "Captain, there's a traitor on board. Examine the horns." The captain said, What? "Captain, there's a traitor on board. Examine the horns." The captain said, "Somebody dared come on this boat who doesn't have horns." He started going around pulling horns. pulled dog horn, it came off. The captain gave him one boot with those sharp horns of his. Overboard, dog started swimming back to shore. Dog shouted over, you see when I reach there, you're gonna see what I'm gonna do you. Wait. And Agouti started running, but dog was bigger than Agouti, and Agouti ran to his hole. But before he could get in, dog went snap with those sharp teeth. And that's how the Agouti lost his tail. Now if you see an Agouti, it has like a stump. And so that is how the Agouti lost his tail. And that story, we heard that story from since we were small. It was hilarious. If you see somebody progressing, do not, just because you couldn't do it, don't be a crab in the barrel. Let dog go and enjoy himself. Who let the dogs out?
Nice. Thank you so much for coming today, Murphy.
Oh,
It's
you're
such a
welcome.
pleasure.
I enjoyed being here. When my children, my nieces and nephew were little, when they came over to my home, oh, we had such a good time. And
You would tell Anansi stories too.
oh yeah, I would tell them Anansi stories, how the Agouti lost his tail, how the monkey tricked the alligator, all sorts of stuff that I heard when I was a child. And then of course there was the music, the dancing.
Before leaving, RPTV captured an exclusive interview with Murphy Brown to hear what she has to say directly about Anansi stories. Let's jump in.
I think Anansi stories are important so that we can know the history of Africans who are in the diaspora, that they have a connection to their African ancestors, because much of our history disappeared during slavery, during the Maafa, which is the time, the dreadful time when our ancestors were taken from the African continent and scattered throughout the Americas and the Caribbean islands. In every single country in Central America, North America, and South America, Africans were enslaved. And in those places, the Anansi stories kept those enslaved Africans with some hope because of the stories, because of the Anansi character, who was this little creature who was able to represent themselves and have some autonomy, because in those days, enslaved Africans had no autonomy, with their children sold away from them, their relatives, friends. So these stories are important, not just for entertainment, but for our history.
Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and visit us on all our social media platforms. Please visit our website for more information.